Welcome back. We're going to start with the resuming the meeting with the safer neighbourhoods item, and which we deferred before. So that's item 16. No, it is
item 17.
17. And staff are going to come to the table and give us a quick overview presentation. So I'd like to welcome Gemma, Hannah and Stephen.
So,
Hannah, isn't it?
yeah.
Welcome. And
Deputy
Dawn
Mayor,
would like to say something.
Deputy Mayor, before staff presenting the detail, I would like to ask Helen White, our Head of Legal, to just give her perspective in terms of the legal position in terms of amendments, etc. In light of a question that was raised by members.
Yes, there's a question raised in relation to a Facebook post and a poll that had been posted on that, and I just wanted to be clear for everyone that councillors are able to speak with their communities, and provided that the communication does not in itself predetermine the outcome.
Okay, Helen. Thank you. All right, the floor is yours.
Thanks. So I'm Gemma Dione, Senior Transportation Engineer, and with me is Hannah Ballantyne, Senior Engagement Advisor, and Stephen Wright, Operations Manager. You've received a couple of presentations on this now at the start of the council meeting when receiving submitters' feedback and at the briefing after, so I will keep this short. The setting of Speed Limits Rule 2022 has changed the way council manage and set speeds. The rule requires all road controlling authorities to develop and consult on a speed management plan. The first full speed management planning period set by the rule is for the 1st of July 2024 to the 30th of June 2027, which aligns with the National Land Transport Programme cycle. The full speed management plan process is preceded by a transitional period where local authorities can utilise interim speed management plans to set speed limits. This interim plan, our Safe Speed Neighbourhoods programme, enables council to share how we manage speed limit changes over this next year prior to that full speed management plan cycle starting. Council is in the process of developing that long-term speed management plan for 2024 onwards, which takes a whole of network approach considering speed limits, safety infrastructure and enforcement. This is to be consulted on later this year. Our interim plan is therefore effectively phase 1 of introducing safe and appropriate speeds on the network. To save lives in our neighbourhoods, we need Christchurch to have a safe road system that is designed for people. We're all human and we can all make mistakes. So we can't stop crashes occurring, but we can change the outcomes of those crashes. Today, we're here to seek approval for our Safe Speed Neighbourhoods proposal for speed management. The science behind speed management is all about survivability. We know that regardless of what caused the crash, the speed at which a person is travelling almost always determines if those involved walk away, unharmed or not. Setting safe and speed limits will result in a number of benefits that allow council to deliver across many strategic goals. A reduced number of people seriously injured or killed on our roads, provide safer walking, cycling or scooter trips to and from school for children and their families, provide more choice for people travelling around their neighbourhood, provide more people with low-cost options for moving around, creating a more inclusive transport network, and enabling people to make healthier choices that we can create a healthier environment with lower carbon emissions and improved air quality. Speed management isn't new for Christchurch, we've done it before. Our Safe Speed Neighbourhoods proposal is focused on reducing speed limits through simply changing signs in the neighbourhoods and around schools across the city. We will monitor following implementation and deliver targeted infrastructure where it is required to support those speed changes. This is an efficient and effective approach to reducing trauma on our streets, backed by local examples. A study found that for every 10 kilometre posted speed limit change, we typically observe a 2 to 3 kilometre change in mean speeds. So reducing from 50 to 30, we could expect a drop of 4 to 6 kilometres in the mean speed of vehicles on our streets. Auckland Transport undertook a study on the first phase of the safe speed limits after they had them in place for 2 years. In the areas covered by lower speed limits, road deaths had fallen by 30%, and in areas not treated with speed limits changes, deaths had increased. In 2016, Christchurch introduced a 30-kilometre zone within the central city. Since the introduction of that, the number of crashes resulting in death or serious injury has also reduced. In the 2-year period from 2020 to 2021, there were fewer than 60% fewer serious crashes than that had been in the 2-year period 2014 to 15 prior to the speed limits being changed. So where does this fit? Previously, we've consulted on speed changes in neighbourhood by neighbourhood or even street by street where requested. The new Ministry of Transport setting of speed limits rule has changed that, and this diagram just provides a further explanation. Our Safe Speed Neighbourhood programme forms the first phase of incorporating a number of existing programmes underway and schools, where there is a requirement to provide safe and appropriate speed limits. Please note that when we say interim, we're talking about an interim plan, not interim speeds. The speeds that you make a decision on today are permanent and would need to be amended through a future speed management plan. Later this year, we will consult on that full speed management plan, which will set a vision for the next 10 years and the first 3-year implementation plan. So what have we consulted on? Schools make up the bulk of the Safe Speed Neighbourhoods proposal. However, a few extra areas were included. The new rule requires Council to categorise all schools following the guidance provided by Waka Kotahi. All Christchurch schools have children using active modes to get to and from school. Therefore, all schools in Christchurch have been categorised as Category 1 schools and will have 30km speed limits as per the rule, either permanently on local streets or by using variable speed limits on busier roads. Under the rule, a road controlling authority may determine what sections of the road under our control are classified as a road outside a school, having regard to the typical or expected routes for pedestrian access to the school, so originally just outside the front gate, but now the rule allows for the purpose of making people feel safe to walk to and from school or to travel on cycles and mobility devices and encouraging them to do so. Setting safe speed limits around all of our schools improves actual and perceived safety to encourage and enable more active travel to and from school. It also reduces the risk to children and families of being killed or seriously injured while travelling to or from school. This also contributes to 2 levels of services set by Council, reducing the number of death and serious injury crashes on the local road network and limiting death and serious injury crashes per capita for cyclists and pedestrians. Therefore, the proposals that were consulted on not only include the area outside the school gate, but where children were travelling to and from school and back again within their community. The Council included in the long-term plan a programme called Slow Speed Neighbourhoods, which was provided with a specific budget to deliver 5 slow speed neighbourhoods per year for 3 years. We've delivered 5 areas and have 10 to implement this financial year as the budget in the LTP finishes this year. Implementing the approved speed limit changes associated with the CRAF Fund. These include the areas in Richmond, Linwood, Woolston and Sydenham, Summerfield, Waltham and Beckenham. These are fully funded by the Crown. As Council can seek 90% funding through the CEF programme, an area of school zones has been packaged up for delivery as well through this programme. We see an opportunity for efficiency to be made with new subdivisions being designed and signed as per safe and appropriate speeds in the recently released Speed Management Guide. This will mitigate the need for Council to then go and consult and change these retrospectively. They can be done as the development is being built. Although rural roads are not the primary target of this interim plan, Banks Peninsula as a collective area has only a few remaining roads to undergo speed limit changes in order to complete the area entirely. We are taking this opportunity to keep the momentum going and tie up the loose ends in this plan as a result. It is important to note that just because we aren't addressing some roads, it doesn't mean they won't get addressed at all. The full speed management plan will look to review these areas and also the remaining neighbourhoods as a priority, given the feedback that we've received from our Safe Speed Neighbourhood proposal. We consulted on the plan with an interactive map. During consultation, this map was viewed more than 25,000 times. Consultation feedback. So we received 2,008 comments that were made by 1,139 unique businesses, organisations and individuals. 24% clearly stated their support for the changes 11% opposed, and the remaining 66% were observations or specific requests. Many of these requests, mostly for zone extensions, enforcement, traffic calming measures, or requests for lower speeds than what was proposed. As usual, we've made changes as a result of consultation feedback and gathered additional feedback to ensure this was supported by the community. So in addition to the schools, we have 10 neighbourhood areas that are funded through the Slow Speed Neighbourhood Program, which are on the left. And on the right were some additions that were made post-consultation and that we undertook additional consultation on with the public in those areas. And here's just a map to show the different neighbourhood areas spatially. So they are set in purple. The red area is the surf area, and the green areas are the craft areas. All the orange streets are those associated with school speed limit changes. So that's the end of the presentation. We can take questions.
Dawn wants to say a couple of words first.
Gemma, I thought that was an excellent presentation, extremely clear and specific in terms of the report, so well done.
Thanks.
Thank you, I agree. Right, we'll open it up for some questions. Sarah?
Thanks so much. So one of the main requests I've had from people and a lot of stuff in the ward has been actually to extend some of these areas, and I know that a couple of things happened during the process based on feedback early enough to get some feedback from people. But I just want to reassure people that if they've asked for an extension that hasn't been done now, that will be consulted on later in this year, and you'll take into account all of those requests when proposing the next stuff.
Correct. So when we consult on the speed management plan later this year, those amendments, those requests will be shown on the map for inclusion in the next speed management plan.
Yeah, and the plan's focused around schools, so primary schools and high schools. Next time round, will we specifically look in more detail at preschools as well?
Yes, that has come through the submissions. There was, I think, one preschool. I think someone asked for the 30k, and there's over 300 likes for that. So we've tried to incorporate as many as we can now within the school streets. But yes, following feedback from council as well, we can definitely take a look at those in the next speed management plan.
That's great. Thank you.
Victoria?
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a lot of information to take in, and I appreciate that you've been scrambling in the last 24 hours to get some more information. Can I just get some clarity, please, around how much of what's happening under the new rule is mandatory and where the discretion is, please?
Yes. So mandatory is the schools. The rule, section 5 of the rule, allows for the road controlling authority to determine what their class is as school street. So we've looked at where... That's okay. It's okay. So we've looked at areas around the schools where we think children will be travelling. If there's a big main road, then we could say, well, actually, it's more of a journey that a parent would take, and that would be a supported journey. So we've tried to have the scope around schools taken into consideration the neighbourhood. The ones that are really up for more conversation are the neighbourhoods, so the areas identified in purple, which is more of a long-term plan commitment that was considered and requested by council. And then the craft areas and the surf areas, although both of those do cover large areas of multiple schools. So we would have to further break down the surf and craft areas if you were just looking to approve school areas.
Okay, so just drilling in a little bit further, when I read 3.7 of your report at page 168 on our papers, it says that the safe and appropriate speed for a local street is 30 kilometres an hour. So does that mean that every street within our city, which is classified as a local road, is required to be at 30?
So it's not required as part of the rule. The rules isn't that specific. What we So Waka Kotahi were mandated to provide the safe and appropriate speed limits for the different road classifications. And as part of signing up, I guess, as to Road to Zero and our own levels of service of reducing death and serious injury on our network, that council would look to align with those safe and appropriate speed limits. But we're also cognizant that some of the community might not be there yet. So the rule and the guide do allow for transition to 30 kilometres an hour on local streets. So hence the 40 kilometres in some of the neighbourhoods that are probably that bit older, the streets are a bit wider, and that aren't necessarily immediately, I guess, aware to a driver that it's a 30 kilometre an hour street. So we did have some of those 40k zones in there, and then ultimately towards the end of the 10-year plan, we could go back and reassess those to get those to safe and appropriate speed limits. So yes, long-term goal would be local streets be 30, main roads be slightly higher, and then your busier roads.
So can I just clarify, there's some discretion then around the interim measures and that transition that you refer to, and you talk then about the long-term goal being 30. Is it a goal or is it a requirement? That's what I'm trying to get to.
So it's for schools, and what the road controlling authority determines as a school street under the rule should be 30. That's the safe and appropriate speed limit around schools. Outside of that, we could say if it's not, if we don't class that street as a school street, then we could go to 40, and then ultimately 10, 15 years time, you could look again to make that 30.
Look, I'm clear about the schools. It's the local roads and the neighbourhood areas that I haven't got clarity on that. I'm sorry. I don't know whether I'm missing something here. I'm just trying to understand. From what you've told us today is that over this transition period, we have some discretion around the 30, 40, 50, but that ultimately, after we've been through that 10-year plan, all local roads are required to be 30. That's my reading of the law under the new rule under the Land Transport. What is it? The Land Transport Act. So have I read that correctly?
I think it is. It would be at our discretion, or your discretion as elected members. We're making recommendations for 40k and 30k limits in those areas, but there is discretion allowed in that space.
So in 10 years' time, some of those streets could still be 40.
Yes.
Thank you. I do have questions, thanks. Can I have some clarification in terms of how much of this project is funded by central government via Waka Kotahi and how much, or other means, and how much by our ratepayers, please?
Correct. So the school speed limit changes are being funded by Waka Kotahi at 51%. The craft areas are being 100% funded by the Crown. The surf areas would be 90% funded by Waka Kotahi. And the neighbourhoods we've got in front of Waka Kotahi for 51% funding.
And in terms of ongoing maintenance, the paper that we have before us says that the cost will be funded over the area maintenance contract. So what are the cost implications from year to year of the changes that we've got coming ahead of us?
So when the speed limit signs are put in, we don't expect to undertake any maintenance in the first couple of years because they're signs, they would have been constructed as per our specifications. I did speak to maintenance. We generally would be looking at around 1% of all of the signs that would require maintenance per year ongoing from that. We haven't yet completed detailed design to understand how many actual signs that we've got at the minute. We've got an estimate for what we undertook, our high-level cost estimates for the program, but that needs to be refined, and then we would be able to understand more about how much that 1% would actually look like and the cost associated with that. So I can't give you that information. One
of the main benefits of doing area-based speed limits is you can actually have a reduction in signage because you don't need to re-sign every speed limit change. So if you have an whole area that's consistently 40 or 30, the actual maintenance cost will probably reduce because there'll be less signage out there.
But isn't the reality that if we're transitioning over time, we're spending money on signs now and those signs are going to be taken down, and then we spend more money on putting up a new sign at some stage within the next transition period? So although there may not be costs associated with maintenance of the new signs, the reality is that within 1 to 3 years, the number of those new signs are going to be changed anyway. So there'll be additional costs associated through that transition period.
I think whatever gets approved today, I don't think we'd be looking. I don't think that those speed limits will change over 1 to 3 years. They may do in 10 years' time, or if there's a specific requirement, or there's lots of people who are against it and lots of noise around something, we may look to do individual changes. On the whole, we wouldn't be looking to change anything.
Thank you. So whilst we're still on costs, I'm just conscious of what's been in the media recently around Wellington City Council and their 30 speed zones and the mistakes that were made with their cost-benefit analysis. Unless I'm missing something, I haven't seen a cost-benefit analysis for Christchurch City Council. Is there one somewhere in the paperwork somewhere that can be shared with us?
No, there isn't a cost-benefit analysis. There's no requirement from Waka-Kotahi to provide a cost-benefit analysis for funding the speed limit changes. The interim plan's fully aligned with the government policy statement on land transport and aligned with the intent of the speed management guide. So council are working towards implementing safe and appropriate speeds. At a national level, the Road to Zero Speed and Infrastructure Programme business case for Aotearoa estimated that the speed management and infrastructure improvements could deliver approximately half of the 40% reduction in death and serious injuries. So council hasn't undertaken a cost-benefit analysis. It's on the understanding that we're working and aligning towards what Waka-Kotahi are seeking, so therefore we didn't actually need to do one.
Yep, thank you for that. My final two questions. The first one is around engagement. What percentage of our population in Christchurch has engaged with this proposal, and how satisfied are you that the feedback we've got is a fair and a true and accurate representation of all of our road users?
We're very satisfied with the level of engagement for this project. We met all the requirements of the Local Government Act. On paper, this project is considered to be of medium significance. This is because we're implementing government direction, and our ability and the ability of our residents to influence change to that direction is relatively low. These are safety initiatives for the benefit of our communities. We recognise that this project had the potential to generate some public interest, so we invested significantly more time and resource into our communications, marketing and engagement. As we talked about in the presentation, we had more than 25,000 views of the map. Not all of those people chose to make a comment, but that's the nature of consultation and the democratic process. It's not compulsory. For that reason, we don't aim to hear from a percentage of the population. That would be for market research or a referendum. This is consultation where we make our best endeavours to make people aware of the opportunity to have their say. We use multiple channels to reach people, and in this instance we had a marketing budget of around 35,000, which created excellent reach into our communities. That's a very generous budget for a medium significance project where we're implementing on a government direction. For comparison, it's very similar to what we'd be spending on an annual plan, where residents have a much more significant opportunity to influence decision making.
I think what I'd say also, for the next stage of the speed management plan, we would welcome feedback on the consultation process to see how we could improve it and get a wider view.
Thank you for that. I accept that staff have gone to great lengths and worked really hard on this over a reasonable period of time, so no disrespect to what's been undertaken. I was just interested in your thoughts on that. My final question then is really around the evidential basis of the changes. And in your report at clause 5.5, you reference that an independent review of vulnerable road users, trauma and effectiveness of speed management has been completed. Now, I might have missed it, but have we been provided with that report, or are what we're seeing is simply your interpretation and your analysis of the results that have been presented in that study, that review?
So the study is currently still ongoing. I asked the independent consultants to provide some initial feedback, which I've put into the report, but I'm hoping to get it finalised. So before we go out for our next speed management plan, that we have that data available for the community to read.
So
Thank you very much, and apologies for my phone going off.
just for a point of clarity, Gemma, you sought the advice of the independent person, and that is their advice in the report. It isn't an interpretation of their advice from yourself.
No, that's the information provided by them.
Thank you very much.
Right, Tyler. And Jake.
Jack, yeah.
Are you there, Tyler?
Yeah, is that?
Oh, here we go.
Can you turn your mic on, Tyler?
Is that working?
We've got you. Yeah.
Great. Apologies for my sick daughter yet again. Her mum's on the way. Just a couple of quick questions. I'm wondering if I'm able to ask questions of the amendments.
We're not quite there yet, I think. Can we just get questions in terms of the presentation, and we will come back to you when we get to the amendments, if that's all right?
Okay, so even staff's feedback of the amendments, I just
Well, we'll
maybe
get
I'm
to
missing
that.
it.
We will get to that, don't worry.
Haven't put
Okay.
We haven't put them yet. So do you have anything
Okay, no
you want
worries.
to ask staff now? Are you okay?
No. It's more for the elected members and staff asking about the amendments themselves. So that's cool.
That's
We'll
great.
get to you.
Jake.
Oh no, I didn't have
You're
a question of a substantive. I do have a question of amendments though when we get to it.
Thank you.
So Kelly, did you have one?
Yep, I do. Yeah, thanks for that. Really interesting. Totally supportive of the changes around schools. However, if we were to say no based on not wanting to lower speeds in the surrounding communities, what would the ramifications of that be if this council voted no today to that? Would it be forced upon us by central government, by Waka Kotahi down the track?
I don't think anyone's tested that yet. I think if it didn't go through as it currently stands today, we would look to possibly reduce the amount of streets around schools so that we could actually achieve the requirement of the rule for the 40% by the end of 2024. It would probably require further consultation where we've created an expectation that the 30 kilometre an hour zones are quite large around the school areas currently. So that would have to require some further communication with the community. But I don't think anyone's tested Waka Kotahi's powers yet in terms of not delivering, because we're not at 2024 yet.
But just for clarity, you extended those zones because of the early engagement.
Yes, so some
What
zones
people
were
wanted.
extended. Yes, so I think to condense those, if we were just trying to get closer to the schools, it would require further communication with the communities.
Okay, because when I look at the maps in some areas, it's like it feels like there's an overreach. It's a lot wider. So, for instance, just looking at Parklands, which is next to my area, I see that the 30k proposal extends a long way away from the school, like kilometres away. And I don't quite understand that. I'm just trying to get some clarity around why that is. Yeah.
So with the Parklands area, there were some requests for extending the 30 kilometre an hour zone. The issue with Parklands is trying to define areas where it makes logical sense to change the speed limits, and then because of the two schools are, I guess, fairly separated, that then it becomes this area in the middle where it's unclear to a road user what speed that we're wanting them to travel at. So with Parklands, it did get that broader area because of just trying to accommodate the different, I guess, cognitive awareness of a driver that they're changing through multiple speed zones within smaller areas. So it was just the nature of the street network in Parklands that it did grow.
And Yeah, just another question. So, why was 30 kilometres chosen and not, say, 20? Is there any particular, information around that?
I don't have any. Councils work towards the safe and appropriate speed set within the speed management guide produced by Waka Kotahi. And 30 kilometres is the survivable speed that's been tested internationally. So I guess that's their rationale for choosing 30.
And just around the statistics, are you aware of how many pedestrians have been hit in Christchurch, say over the last year or the last couple of years?
So
I did read some stats in there, but yeah.
Yeah, so the in-depth analysis is being undertaken, and I think, what do we have here? The highest category of crashes for CCC are cyclists, representing 61% of the analysed Christchurch scaled vulnerable road user injury crashes, while pedestrians represent 18% and motorcyclists 21%. So I only have those percentages, but the deep dive into more of our crashes and the effect of speed in the crashes is still being undertaken.
Yeah, yeah. I guess I'm just trying to understand the need for it. If there were, lots of pedestrians being hit and run down, or children in particular, I could understand it better. Like I say, really understand it around schools, but yeah, I just don't see the connect between the number of people being hit and the need to put the speed limit down to 30k for vast areas of our city.
So that's obviously for when you get to debate, Councillor Barr, because
Sure,
that's your
sorry.
opinion.
Yeah. Okay.
I think
Anyway,
one thing to note would be, as a simple way that I tried to think about it, is just being proactive. So through our tickets, we hear, are you waiting for someone to get injured, or are you waiting for someone to die? And this approach means that no, we're actually proactively trying to not have those things happen on our network.
yeah, no, I appreciate that. Okay, thank you.
Celeste.
First of all, thank you for the great work you've done. I've certainly had lots of positive feedback, and it's really great to see this work go ahead. I just want to ask you some questions around areas that are sort of perhaps in terms of socio-economic areas that might be a bit more reliant on walking and other modes of transport. So families that might not have cars, such as Linwood, parts of Parkland, New Brighton. Is it safe to assume that in those areas, kids might have to, they might not live next to the school, so they might have to travel further, so it's really hard to determine which is the zone that kids will be walking across. So, for example, would it then be appropriate to look at a wider area to cover for lower speeds, to ensure that those kids could get to school safely?
Yes, I think ultimately through the speed management plan, and as Victoria alluded to, Councillor Henstock alluded to before, is that all of those local streets will eventually become that lower speed, so children can move around their neighbourhood safely, whether they're going to their friend's house or to school. The longer journeys by bicycle, we've got the major cycleway network, and the lower speeds on local streets will also form a secondary network for people to feel safe and comfortable riding their bicycle. Yes, there were gaps around some of the eastern area as we consulted. I think that's just because of the lower number of schools in certain areas, but the speed management plan will look to address a lot of the eastern side and a lot more of the hillside communities that have not been part of this interim plan.
So just for those that are listening that are looking for more changes in those areas, as Councillor Timmerton alluded to before, they can look forward to that happening as well as part of the next tranche of work?
Correct.
Great. And just final question, in general, I look at the consultation feedback and there was strong support across those eastern suburbs for these changes? Great,
I agree
thank you.
with it.
Thanks, Celeste. Tyler?
Kia ora. Just a couple of questions regarding the, referring to page 172 on the agenda. In the Riccarton area, you have quite a few deferrals to the speed management plan. Can you talk to me on the basis of why you defer the Wharenui school zone with the extension of, which is including the south of Riccarton Mall?
Yes, so the extension to the Wharenui school zone was looking at Division Street and Linden Street. That did require additional consultation as it was separate to what was in the original plan. We thought it would be better to look at the whole area around Westfield Mall South to Blenheim Road as a more of a holistic plan, and then consult on that as part of the speed management plan for implementation within the first few years of that speed management plan.
Oh, that's a great idea. So you're actually wanting to consult more and maybe wrap around a bit more around the Westfield Mall precinct?
Correct.
Okay. No, that's fine. I did request to ask if Dean's Ave could be reviewed as a part of that SMP between years 1 and 3. Are you able to add that at all? Because there were some Dean's Ave precinct residents that were giving feedback on the dangers of it, particularly around the speed management profile, but also the transient communities that come through Dean's Ave. Would you be able to add that to a list of maybe looking into a review of consultation for the Dean's Ave precinct?
Yes, that's absolutely fine. We received your email through Office of CE with that request on, so that's included in the next SMP engagement process.
Great. So I won't need to have an amendment or anything. It's already being underway.
Correct.
Okay. No, that's really good. It's clarified everything. Thank you very much for your work. Appreciate it.
Thank you. You would have picked that up through the submission process anyway. So we've got Aaron next.
Yeah, I've got a few questions. The first one's regards to 1.2, just over schools being 40% of schools by 2024 and all the remainder by 2027. Given that this, I mean, some of us have been lobbying to government for a set speed around schools since ever we've been elected. Now we can do it, but we're not. It's going to take till 2027. Why is there not just a blanket rule across the whole country that now that we're allowed to do it, that outside every school, the same distance as we have now, so we don't have to do all of this other stuff. We just go, value measurements around every single school, 30k an hour. By the end of the year, it's all delivered. Why is that not the plan? Because how do we explain to a parent in 2 years' time who has a child run over outside
Aaron,
of school?
let them answer the question before you go into the detail of how the child's going to reach its demise.
Okay.
Stephen.
So we've consulted on all of the schools now so that we can just get into implementation. We anticipate delivering before 2027. So whilst there's the 40% by 2024, if this gets approved today, we move into detailed design, tender and construction, the funding's there for us to be able to deliver this as quick as possible outside the schools.
So why would we consult with the schools? Would we just not go outside every school's 30k? So every driver goes, oh, there's a school, I'm doing 30k. So it's just a standard rule.
We're just working towards the guidance that we've been provided by Waka Kotahi. We haven't been involved in how or why the speed limits are being set the way they are.
We're probably required to, aren't we, under the Local Government Act? Does that apply to this?
But if there's no choice by 2027,
I know.
Why?
Consultation was about making sure that the zones were right. So we wanted to talk to the school community specifically and say, what do you classify as your school area? And you'll see on the map in Bigtincan, all the school zones are a little bit different because for some schools, they classify a couple blocks as their regular used school area versus others, which is more the front gate.
Does this not slightly go against Waka Kotahi's position that consistency creates compliance? Because if you use the same rule everywhere for everyone, you get the behaviour, but if it changes, it's like, oh, it's a rural school, cool, I can go a bit faster. Oh, it's a high school, that's 40. No, here's a primary school, it's 30. I mean...
Yeah, so for this interim plan or stage 1 of the plan, we are actually including all schools. So all schools are included in what the plan is in front of you today. And then we just need to work on, depending on what's approved, how we implement them over the next year or so.
Right.
So we're asking for you to approve speed limit changes outside all schools within Christchurch City Council boundaries today. If that's approved, we would prioritise.
So those numbers in 1.2 are just
those numbers are what the
Waka
speed
Kotahi
management
numbers,
guide.
not your numbers.
No.
Right.
We've taken a active decision to try and do all schools as quick as possible.
So the
Done within a
40%,
year. Okay,
the 40% isn't a ceiling. It's you've got to meet that and go beyond. Effectively, is it
We're
not?
going beyond.
And we're going beyond.
Right, yeah, just an easier sell to the public when we're doing all schools within a year to 30k.
So the officers are clear.
But it is still about taking people with us on this journey, Aaron, because nobody wants to be
I don't think
top-down
there's-
instructing. It's about
Of-
consultation. Also explains to people a bit of
Yeah.
the why, which is really good for actually getting compliance.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. There's been certainly no pushback
Yeah.
anywhere
Any further questions?
around schools. Yes, plenty. So
What, plenty? How many?
1.9 is so it's got down. It's a median significance policy, and we had 1,139 submitters putting in just under 2,000 submissions. So that's less than 0.5% of our population.
Again, we don't look at percentage of the population. We can inform people about the ability to have your say, but we can't force them to submit.
So we're not
I
worried
think
that
that
we're
was
making
just
this
answered in the
major.
last question anyway. It's a reasonably high feedback, especially when you compare it to our
Think
annual
about the annual
plans.
plan.
Yeah, we're pretty happy with the number.
You can do what we can do. Like you say, people don't have to submit. So another question, Aaron?
Well, as long as if we think everyone knows about it, then that's good. But I'll
We try.
sit in the camp that might question that. 5.5. So this is an interesting one that we've got. It says 34 fatals over 5 years. So firstly, of the 34 fatals over 5 years in 5.5, how many were fatals because the law wasn't being obeyed? So speed limit could have been 30, but if the person that hits you is doing 130, it's still not going to be a good outcome, or they're in a stolen car or whatever. How many of those, and I've already asked this, but do we know those numbers?
So Aaron, I think there's outstanding evidence of staff that already explained that reduced speeds reduce damage to people. So I think we're just going to leave it at that rather than delve into
Yeah,
the
but if
weeds
you post,
to get the
so
exact
you're saying
numbers.
if we post it at 30k now, no one will go down that street at 100. Is that what happens? Because statistically...
No, I think that's been disingenuous. Have you got another question, or I'm going to go to Jake?
Okay, well then the next one is 5.6, which has the 74 deaths between 2018 and 2022. So over the same 5-year period, we've got a completely different number. Why is that?
So within the crash analysis system, that's the reported crashes. There is the crash analysis system only generally collects around 51% of vehicle crashes. It doesn't include for all of them. So there are under-reporting factors provided by Waka Kotahi.
It's not under-reporting deaths, though, is there?
So no, the fatalities are generally all reported,
Yep.
but not all serious crashes are reported, especially if it involves a single person or there's just no vehicle involved. So the hospital admissions rates are generally higher, but the crash analysis system doesn't report on those.
Right.
So
That explains the discrepancy.
there are discrepancies.
So
No,
any
it
more
doesn't.
questions?
No,
Tyrone
because
is waiting
5.5's
patiently.
got 34 fatals, and that same 5-year period is 5.6 has got 74.
Which
That's
one do you
quite-
prefer? I
Sorry,
mean,
councillor.
one's
Yep.
too many, isn't
So
it?
I'm just trying to work out which, yes,
Just-
one is too many,
Yeah.
but
So can
30
we,
more than the others, way too many.
I think
Sorry,
that's just been
councillor.
explained.
The 30 number is just fatals. The other number is death and serious injury crashes.
Great, thank you.
But it says this includes 74 deaths and 651 serious injuries. So it's either it's a death or it's not. It says in here it's a death. If everyone else is okay with the numbers being so out, that's cool. We'll call ourselves Wellington. But I don't like those numbers being so far out
No,
when we're making decisions on this, because deaths on the road
Aaron,
are very
just let
emotive.
staff respond.
So we will get that clarified as part of the finalising the independent analysis of the crashes.
Thank you.
Cool. And then on 6.1, it says that the emergency services here says that they support the speed reductions in 6.1, but in 6.9 they don't.
So when we're talking about emergency services, there's the police, FENS, and St John's.
Yeah.
We've had ongoing dialogue with the police around the Safe Speed Neighbourhoods program.
Mm-hmm.
They support it. I mean, even recently they were out on Hallswell Junction Road taking speed surveys, and there was quite a high proportion of people speeding. So they're very supportive of things that reduce death and serious injury on a network. The emergency service that had the concern was fire and emergency, that had concerns around the journey time responses. They have an internal policy that states that they cannot travel a certain kilometres an hour over the posted speed limit. There's nothing in the rules to say that they can't change that. But as part of our speed management plan, we've had FENS and the emergency responders at the table to help us prepare the speed management plan that's going out for consultation. So they're in the conversation now, not just as a stakeholder, but more of as a supporting contributor to our speed limit changes.
Thank you.
Right, yeah, because it had in here that the answer in here in 6.11 says that there's no speed limit for them, yet FENS staff are told 25 as a guide, police are told 30 as a guide. So
these are internal operational policies that FENS have, is it not? That's
correct.
What you just clearly said.
Yes.
It's not a law. Okay. Is that all, Aaron?
Yeah, there's one other that's missing. That's in the and it's been raised as the cost benefit analysis, but also we don't have any breakdown of the cost of the lost productivity of the increased travel time. And I note that the Wellington report said that travel times are expected to increase by up to 50%. So why would that not be in here when it has such a big impact on our economy and people's lives, which can then lead to bad behaviour?
I can just have a second.
Staff have any comment on that? I know that Simon Kingham's submission said that the slower speed zones do not cost any significant time.
Correct.
It's a perception, isn't it?
It is a perception. Most of the delay that occurs in journey times on the network will be around your traffic lights and general congestion rather than the actual posted speed limits. Where we're looking at speed limit changes on the local streets, it's not anticipated that these are used for major commercial traffic. So these are where people live, it's accessing homes, it's where children will be walking to school. So these streets aren't necessarily the bulk of the network where couriers and commercial freight that needs to get to and from the port are using. So in terms of our speed management plan, the main roads will have a variable limit, so it's just during those school times. But the actual local streets that form the bulk of this are really not streets where we want to encourage a lot of commercial traffic to be using.
Thanks, Gemma.
If I could just clarify that data as well that you were talking about earlier. The number of death, that's 74, that's the number of deaths. And then the 34 was the number of fatal crashes. So within one crash, yes, yeah, sorry. So I'd clarify that. Sorry.
Thank you. Well done. Tyrone? And then I think, Sarah, you were happy to move this, aren't you?
Thanks, Pauline. I've got a couple actually. So one's Uber specific. So on the table on attachment A, you've got a couple of streets there that are listed as Diamond Harbour Township, but one's in Little River and one's in Devotials. And I just want to double check. I mean, one of them is Devotial School Lane, which is listed as proposed for 30, which is fine because A, it's next to a school, and B, it's a dead end, so anybody driving any faster down there needs their head read. But on Western Valley Road, I just want to check that the fact that you've assessed it as Diamond Harbour hasn't affected the speed that you've assessed for it.
No, it'll be on the maps, and what's in the interim plan, Western Valley Road at Little River is for Little River School. it's not Diamond
Oh, yeah,
Harbour.
it is. Yep. No, that's cool. No, that makes sense. Second, which is a bit more general, but for the roads on Banks Peninsula that service the eastern bays effectively. So I mean, they're all 100 at the moment. Now I know that there's a really strong community feeling that like, well, what idiot's going to drive at 100 around there anyway? So why do you need to change it? Now that's okay. So I understand that, but but there aren't really any signs at the moment that say, oh, it's 100 here. Like people just know that it's open road and that. If it's reduced to 60, which is probably the speed that most people, again, is quite hard to get up to a lot of the time, are we going to see a proliferation of signage across the peninsula, or how's that going to be communicated?
So we only need to sign where there's a change in speed limit. So if a lot of the streets in Banks Peninsula go to 60, you could actually just reduce the amount of signs, because unless you see another sign, you drive to the speed limit that you saw on the previous sign. So we don't anticipate putting a lot of more signs out on the peninsula. Would probably just be changing the ones that were there if they needed to be changed.
So I mean, if you're coming up State Highway 75 to the hilltop going 80, well, you'd be lucky to get up to 80 there, but anyway, but it is 80, and you're going to transition into the Summit Road. There's no sign there currently, as far as I can remember. Is there suddenly going to be a sign that says 60?
Correct. If it transitions from 80 to 60, we would have to put up a sign.
But that might be the only sign that you see.
Correct.
All the way to Le Bon's Bay or whatever. Like you might not see another sign, right?
No, we don't necessarily have to put repeaters up. We can when it's over 50 kilometres an hour. We generally use repeaters for 50 to 100. But we would, again, monitor that post-implementation, and if we needed to put up another sign, we could. But the initial proposal is just to put them at the change points and then monitor it from there.
So signage is really going to be kept to as minimal
Correct.
a level as possible, because there's an awful lot of roads there.
Correct.
An awful lot of distance.
I think the officer, Tyrone, has made that really clear.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, that's good. That's all. Cheers.
Right, so no more questions. So Sarah has moved it. Is there a seconder? Celeste. And so we've got the recommendations. They haven't been moved yet.
No, they haven't been moved. Oh, I think we need to ask.
No, they don't.
These are currently the withdrawn.
So it's just the two taken out, is it? H and I.
So I think it's appropriate that you ask Deputy Mayor.
So we have an amendment that's been put up by, is it Victoria, and seconded Andre, is that correct? Is that correct? Are you moving this amendment?
Yeah, I am wanting to move the amendment. I haven't had an opportunity to liaise with Councillor Moore over this because it was just put on our desks as we walked in.
Well, so are they not your amendments? Did you write them?
So these were drafted in response to the requests that the councillors had put in. So they were drafted so they would be formal amendments and would make sense and be consistent with it. So it was what you had requested, and then they were drafted as appropriate amendments.
The question that I had put to the OCE was whether it would be possible to reflect, have an amendment that reflects the difference between the school zones and the neighbourhood zones. And I think what we've got here is that, and I wonder if that can just be confirmed by staff or the OCE, that what we've got here means that we can vote separately on approving the change in zones around schools, and then we can vote separately for the neighbourhood areas. And if that's what's reflected in there, then that was my intention.
Correct. So the resolutions in front of you would allow you to vote on each of the different neighbourhoods if you wanted to include them or exclude them, rather than doing it as a whole neighbourhood, removing all the neighbourhoods from this. You would vote on each individual neighbourhood for inclusion or not.
So you mean A to N in here?
Yes.
Excluding H and I. And so are you, is this actually, This is retaining the school areas but reducing the zone that you extended out from these ones.
So this
the
includes
neighbourhood.
the school zones, but it would exclude the purple areas on the map that's on the presentation. And it would also exclude the additional areas that were consulted on after the main consultation period.
Yes.
So the likes of Redcliffe, Heathcote. I think there was 2 streets in Fendleton and 1 in Papanui.
Yes.
So can I clarify, please, then what my request was? I'm just slightly confused with your answer there. I've asked whether we can vote on the streets around the school zones as a separate, and then I just simply asked for a vote on not approving the rest as one lump, as one bulk. But you've taken it further now and you've broken all that down into the different zones. Okay, thank you.
So to address this, if this amendment was put and passed, these would be pulled out of the main resolution and we could then vote on the rest of the resolution as it is, but these would not be in it.
Correct. And then I think you would have to re-vote on an amended primary resolution for the,
You'd say the substantive would then
Yes.
exclude these areas that have been already voted on if it was to pass. Tim?
Just to clarify, Whakatahi has said that there should be 30 k's in front of schools. So what Councillor Henstock has said is want to put the schools separate to the neighbourhoods, but we actually don't have a say. And I've been battling, as Aaron said, for over 10 years to get safe speed in front of schools. So I'm more than happy with 30 k's. And if they'd only take out U-turns, but I'll stop there. So we can't actually vote no to schools because it's being dictated to us, which is I'm totally 100% approval of.
Yep.
So I don't quite understand how we can.
So the zones that have been separated out are small neighbourhoods that don't have a school within them. They're more on the periphery of Christchurch. And that really is your long-term plan slow speed neighbourhood program that you would be not passing today, but it is on the understanding that it would be reconsulted on as part of the speed management plan.
Tyler first. Okay, so shall we open it up for questions to staff on the amendment that Tyler indicated he has one, and then Sarah and Kelly. Tyler.
Hilda, I think I'm pretty clear. I just wanted to understand the premise of why you'd take out exclude the neighbourhoods.
So the staff recommendation is to still include the neighbourhoods, to accept the interim speed management plan as a whole, which would allow us to start delivering and also then to start engaging on a full speed management plan. The requests for removing the neighbourhoods, the resolutions were prepared following a request from Councillor Henstock.
So
I knew that. It was more about, asking the movers really why the neighbourhoods would be excluded.
Victoria, are you moving the amendment?
I am moving the amendment,
So
but I
would
haven't
you-
understood the question.
Tyler, can you ask the question again to Councillor Henstock?
Can you clarify why you're excluding the neighbourhood zones?
Oh, well, I was going to leave that.
Or why you propose to exclude?
Yeah, I was going to leave that for my debate, but essentially this is, I have no issue with the slow speeds around the school zones, but I am struggling with the extension into the neighbourhood zones that don't have schools around them. And I'm sure you don't want to hear a whole debate from me at the moment, but I'm just conscious that there's a number of councillors that have indicated they're very happy to support the school slow zones, but not the encroaching into the other neighbourhood areas. So I'm just trying to differentiate between the two.
Thanks, Victoria. Do you have another question, Tyler? Was that it?
I do, but I need to think about how I ask. Is Andre? Are you a part of that? I guess are you of the same mind?
Of those neighbourhoods listed here, I don't have any strong views one way or the other. If that helps.
So with your amendment, seeing if they align is.
My amendment's that's very specific. That's just in response to the area was extended based on a singular comment, but the comment was about a different area to the one that's been included in the 30 zone. So this is just retaining the 40 zone in the area where we didn't receive any comments expressing support for lowering to 30, if that makes sense.
Which one is that one?
That's very specific. That's the Councillor Moore one.
Okay.
But
okay.
yeah,
So there were other submissions in the, I guess, across the city around broad strokes around how everything should be this, should be that. I guess that's what the staff were standing on. Is that correct, staff?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
So for example, if they're not targeted, if the feedback isn't targeted to one street, but they're looking at, I guess, blanket speeds of 30s and 40s in certain zones, would that be the reason why you would include those in the speed management plan? So saying if it's not targeted, but it's broad within the area, would that be your mandate to be able to include that?
Broad.
I guess we're aiming for consistency.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and there was quite.
Those are the only questions for now. Thank you.
There's quite a few submitters that requested consistency as well. Yep. Tyler.
Yeah, there was 60%, something like that.
Yeah. So Sarah.
Yeah, it's just a question for Councillor Henstock on the streets in my ward in Redcliffs and Heathcote, and why she's proposing to remove those from the interim speed management plan.
I haven't made any differentiation between any of the areas. It was simply a request to separate out the school zones from the neighbourhood zones, and I don't have any views either way in relation to your particular neighbourhood areas. It was just a blanket, please can we find a way to see if we can support the reduction in the speed zones around schools, but not in the other neighbourhood areas that you've gone into where, as you've said, they are, I think, smaller neighbourhoods with no schools.
Yep.
So my question really is then that if there were residents in this area and there was actually quite good support for, especially the ones in Heathcote, I'm trying to work out why you would then say no to another community for having a lower speed when they request it.
I think we're just going to leave that one for debate.
Well,
and I think
no,
it's
just whether she'd be
fairly
happy
obvious
taking out
why
those
this is
two
being
from.
put forward, Sarah.
Excuse me.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
This amendment is actually wanting to reduce the amount of streets that have a 30 or 40k speed limit and concentrate it to just around the schools. And so you either agree with that or you disagree with that, and we'll address that in the debate and in the vote. Okay. So rather than get into the weeds now. So do you have a seconder?
I don't know if I do have a seconder.
Is there a seconder for Victoria's amendment? Aaron.
And sorry, can I clarify quickly? So currently we've got the A through G because I've seen that H and I have been struck. Are we also including in this amendment the J through N under the additional areas added post-consultation?
So if I can have staff confirm to me that A through to N are all the other areas where there is a small neighbourhood with no school, then that is correct, that it is a full package.
Yep, we'll get that for you.
I think there's a nod coming, so I think you've got a response.
Yes.
That's a yes, right.
That's a yes.
So that's a yes, Katie, the whole thing. A through to N without H or J.
Sorry,
Moved Victoria, seconded Aaron.
Sorry, can I just clarify that? Was that saying that there are no schools in those areas? Is that
yes?
So Parklands has a number of schools.
So the Parklands area that would be excluded would be the area around Rothsay Road, which is slightly off to the left. You did have feedback from submitters that they supported the speed limit changes and wanted additional ones, but the only way to that was more of a defined neighbourhood of Burwood, and I think we put the Parklands area so big that part of Parklands would be excluded and it would become a neighbourhood rather than a school street.
Right, so it's sort of a technical difference, but there are lots of schools in that area. I see what you're saying.
Thank you. Right. So I think we've done that one. We'll move on to the second amendment from Council.
Sorry, we've forgotten Kelly.
Sorry, we have got an Aaron as well. I'm sorry, Kelly.
Yeah. So I would. I'd like to know the process to have E struck out of that.
Can you just vote against it, please, if you don't like it?
Well, I could. I'd also like to.
We don't want to. It's an amendment. It's someone else's.
Yeah,
amendment.
but I'd also like to clarify the fact that you're talking about Preston's, which is already 40 kilometres. And we're talking, and this actually misrefers to it as Preston's, it's actually talking about Preston's Park, which is the lower, the southern side of Preston's Road. So we have inconsistency in the subdivision with 40k in the north and 50 in the south. And I agree that the south should be 40k. So I don't think that should be in there at all, but there you go. What's the process to have it eliminated like those other two below it?
I'm sorry,
I think I can clarify by saying that H&I is not meant to be eliminated, please. It needs to all be in there. And yes, it does, because I've asked for it in its totality. So all the areas that don't have a school in it are what was part of my amendment.
So okay. So Kelly, you'll just have to vote against that one, or you can vote against all of it, some of it. I'll get an indication before I put this, just to see whether we need to put every single one separately. We're going through questions. Yeah, but we've got other questions. Okay. Aaron?
Yeah, it's a follow-up from a point Tim raised before, but it would only work if we did only the school zones. Can we also, if we made all the school zones 30, also have no U-turns in those 30k spaces? Do we have the authority to do that?
That would be a bylaw, would it?
Answer the question.
It's not.
Technically, we can. It's just really difficult to enforce without doing physical treatments. We can put U-turns in. Ban U-turns, but unless there's something there to U-turn around, it just gets really messy and difficult. I think it'd be good
if you have a blanket rule that outside of school you can't do a U-turn, which means you've got to just go around the block and go the other way. Don't try doing your 18-point turn in front of the school when all the kids are crossing badly.
I'm happy to take it offline. But
that's what I was going to recommend. I think we would definitely support trying to do things to make that situation safer.
Suggest we take that offline and deal with it.
But would the problem not be then if you've done the whole neighbourhood? That means you can't U-turn anywhere in the entire neighbourhood.
No, because if we were looking at banning a U-turn, we could look at specific areas and specify that.
Let's take it offline, and Aaron and I, we can chat.
Sarah, your question?
Thanks.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions on these. Where there's been an assertion that there's no school in that area, but we've kind of defined it as a neighbourhood rather than a school. Though they are all adjacent to areas that we have deemed as school areas. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
They are adjacent to them. It's pretty much just a funding decision because the long-term plan has 5 slow-speed neighbourhoods per year for 3 years, and the purple areas are what that pot of money is funding. But yes, they're adjacent to school zones, and there's children that live in those zones that would travel to the adjacent zone to go to school.
Yeah, and so many of these neighbourhoods are also in between 2 school zones, and if we didn't do the neighbourhood at the same time, we would have additional signage, additional variability, and lack of consistent signage and consistent speeds, leading to people being more confused about the speeds in the area. Is that right?
Correct. The more that we can do in terms of local streets, the messaging becomes easier in that when you turn off a local road, you're entering a residential street, slow down. And then ultimately we wouldn't have to rely on extra signs through zones. So yes, having clear defined boundary areas around these slow speeds means it's a lot easier for drivers to understand what we're expecting of them.
And do you know of any statistics kept that would show potentially that crashes mostly happen, statistically speaking, through people deliberately breaking the law?
I don't have that. Sorry.
Yeah, no. I don't know that any exists actually to justify that statement.
Thank you. Tyler?
Firstly, thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to ask elected members some questions for clarity.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask Councillor Peters around point A, and it says here, and approve the additional cost of 4 signs for the exclusion. So what does that mean?
Is that a question of me or a question of staff? Because I had no idea
for you.
It was going to be. Excuse me, I'm answering your question. The cost of extra signs was not something I had raised. That was raised by staff.
Okay.
Yeah, it will be required. I understand that.
Okay.
And on that count, I'm toying with the idea of actually removing that amendment.
Okay. Oh, no worries. I was just asking. It was just for clarity. And the second one was the 30-kilometre speed limit on Waterloo Road. Is that Gilberthorpe's to Hey Hey? Is that on the main strip?
That's just down from the school, so it takes on from where the school's finished down to Gilberthorpe's. And
oh, cool. Okay.
That's been requested by a number of residents and the GHRA in that area.
So, Mark, do
sweet as.
you have a seconder, Mark? Do you have a
seconder?
seconder for your amendment?
I hadn't quite got that far yet because the first we saw this was when we walked in this afternoon. So.
Okay. Is anyone prepared to second Mark's amendment? Aaron? And I was just going to ask staff a question on...
Aaron's already seconded the first set of amendments.
Someone different to second that then? So there's no seconder for Mark's amendment?
Oh, I'd second his point B.
But not point A?
I probably couldn't support point A at this point.
Pauline, are we just able to add point, because point B is like a noting for future consultation rather than a change to an actual boundary. Are we able to just note that we're including it in the next one without having to be an amendment?
Yes, we could do that.
Yep.
Yes, I could just take it as feedback that we would and include it in the next speed management plan.
Is that okay without making an amendment?
That would be helpful, Mark.
Yeah.
It would be noted,
I
it
will
would go
withdraw
through.
mine.
Thank you. So we'll withdraw.
B will be a noting. Yeah.
And so are you withdrawing A as well, Mark? Because you've got no seconder. So your ones are withdrawn. So B becomes a noting report to carry it through to the SMP at the end of the year, and the rest of it's gone. Thank you. And we'll move on to Councillor Moore.
Seconder.
Do you have a seconder for your amendment? No. Is there a seconder? All right, so that one.
Mark's.
Okay, do we have any questions for staff on Andre's amendment?
Just to clarify for staff, Mark's second.
Yeah, so I just need to be clear. So if the noting is going to stand alone as an amendment, since Mark would be the mover for that, you can't second another.
We'll note it in the substantive so we don't have to treat it as an amendment. So we'll allow Mark to second Andre's. Are there any questions for staff on Andre's, Victoria?
Yeah. Can I clarify the streets that you're referring to there in Councillor Moore's amendments? Are they the ones that were answered in the email that's been circulated to all of us, being the streets that were changed from 30 to 40 without any consultation on the basis of a comment made from one submitter?
So there was, in the Westlake area and Oaklands area, there was, I think, 3 separate comments and they had likes against them. When we've tried to accommodate those likes to cover all the small reserves and children's playgrounds in the area and the kindergartens, then understanding that Whale Street looks very similar to some of the other streets. So from a driver perspective, it's not going to feel any different in the 2 zones. Pardon me. So it was extended to make it more legible. However, there's nothing to say that area can't be 40.
Just pause, Jim. I'll have a drink.
Thanks.
It's okay.
Breathing and swallowing is never a good idea.
Thanks, Katie.
Thanks, Katie.
Yes, what's going on?
So in terms of the neighbourhood, the Oaklands area does look a little bit different to Westlake, and the east side of Westlake had been retained at 40. So for Westlake as a whole, it would just retain as 40.
Okay, so to clarify, that is the subject of the email that Councillor Moore had sent that we were all copied into the response, and there wasn't any additional consultation. Thank you.
So, Gemma, in this amendment, is it your recommendation that all of these be moved to 30k and Andre is?
The recommendation is that they go to 40 as originally consulted on as part of the Safe Speed Neighbourhood program. So where we've taken the comments through feedback and we've extended the zone, there's nothing to say that that has to be 30 at this time, and so therefore for Councillor Moore we could change that back to 40 as part of this plan.
So you're happy with that?
That's absolutely fine.
Excellent. Okay, do councillors all understand that? The staff are supportive of Councillor Moore's amendment. And I'm just going to ask staff advice. I think that's the end of the questions. Can I treat this like we did the annual plan and have one debate, then put the amendments and then go to the substantive?
First, does Council Moore have a seconder?
Yes,
for
Mark.
Mark, thank you for that. Yes.
Yeah. So, councillors, I just thought we'd do one debate that covers the whole of the speed, neighbourhood speed topic, and then I'll put the amendments, and then we'll put the substantive.
So you just would have to take the amendments
Separately.
One at a time. So the first up being.
Well, the first one would be Victoria's, but I might get an indication of who wants to vote against which bit or all, because it might save going through each single one. That's all.
Yeah, so if the amendments are taken all together right now to handle Victoria's first, Victoria and
Yes.
Aaron's, so assuming if the meeting votes to accept those, then that rolls up into the substantive motion, then you can consider Councillor Moore and Mark's.
Mark's,
they're in
Mark's
three
is
different-
withdrawn. Oh, you mean the one here?
Yeah.
There's only two now.
Two yeah.
amendments. One's withdrawn.
Yes.
What I'm saying by an indication is, if it was likely to fail, I wouldn't need to put them all separately. That's what we're getting at.
I think there's slight confusion between the question you're asking and the answer you're receiving. You still need to deal with not necessarily individual lines. You'll need to come to that. Councillor Henstock's amendment as one, and then Councillor Moore's as a different vote.
Oh, yeah.
Just so everybody's clear.
Oh, not putting both amendments together. No. All right. So I will now open it up for debate. Sarah.